What's up, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, we're going to talk about the top 10 types of phishing attacks that can be launched against your company, your family, or anyone else you might care about. Well, phishing is often the first stage in a much more sinister attack, like installing crypto miners or backdoors or malware, performing ransomware attacks, or engaging in corporate espionage. Before we get into different ways attackers are bombarding your company and family with phishing attacks, let's take a quick look at the impact if you do absolutely nothing to prevent these attacks.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
According to research by Proofpoint, who interviewed thousands of security leaders around the world, 75% of organizations on the planet experienced some sort of phishing attack in 2020. 12% received over 100 unique phishing attacks. 37% of the respondents received anywhere from 11 to 50 unique phishing attacks. And 28% received 50 to 100 unique phishing attacks. Furthermore, the impact of phishing attacks, according to the respondents, include 60% of organizations losing data, 52% of organizations had credentials or accounts compromised, 47% of organizations were infected with ransomware, 29% of organizations were infected with malware, and 18% of organizations experienced financial losses. In 2020, business email compromise, also known as BEC alone, cost $1.8 billion in financial losses. This means, without taking into account any other types of phishing campaigns, it accounted for $1.8 billion. So, in terms of specific examples, for Google and Facebook, the losses totaled more than $100 million. Belgium's Creeland Bank handed over more than $75 million to cybercriminals, and the Austrian aerospace parts maker FAC lost $61 million. I'll be doing an episode on the top 12 or 15, however many I could find, phishing attacks in terms of monetary value. That episode will be coming out in the next few days, so stick around, make sure you subscribe, and smash the bell to be alerted when I do upload that episode. Now, what's causing these types of massive losses, of course, as this episode is all about, each of these organizations were victims of different and costly types of phishing attacks. What is a phishing attack? Now, in general, a phishing scam, in case you don't know, is a type of cyber attack that cybercriminals use to get users to perform some type of action. These emails are often sent out in mass with the goal of tricking unsuspecting individuals into falling for their scam. Now think of your best bud, the Nigerian prince who keeps trying to get you to take his money for safekeeping. However, phishing has evolved significantly since His Royal Highness first entered the scene. There is now a variety of phishing attacks targeting businesses each day. Some involve the use of emails and websites, and others may use text messages or direct phone calls. You'll actually speak to a scammer.
Could I use your telephone?
Why, certainly, stranger. Help yourself to the use of my telephone.
Hello? I want to speak to my mom, please. Look, Ma, I'm broke again. Could you let me have a few bucks to tide me over? Gee, thanks, Ma.
Attackers use these methods with the goal of getting users to provide personal or account information, or, more sinister, to make wire transfers for funds to fraudulent accounts. The cybercrime industry is reaching unprecedented levels. Cybersecurity Ventures reports that the damages of cybercrime are expected to cost the world $6 trillion annually by the end of this year, of which phishing is anticipated to play a significant role. Again, phishing is often the first entry point into much more sinister attacks. Again, like, the dreaded ransomware or cyber espionage, and again, fraud in terms of financial fleecing of your accounts. But when we talk about phishing, what types of phishing attacks are we specifically talking about? There are actually multiple types of phishing scams that businesses are targeted by on a daily basis. Now, we put together this list of the most prevalent types of phishing attacks. The goal here is to help familiarize you with the many of the different types of phishing attacks that exist and provide an overview of how they work or what sets them apart from the other types of phishing scams. We start off with smishing. Now, SMS phishing, or smishing, is a form of phishing that capitalizes on the world's addiction to text messaging and instant communications. We all walk around with our phone, we get constant buzzes and pings and whatever. Now, have you ever received a text message from Amazon or Target, or how about DHL? Smishing is a way for cybercriminals to lure users into downloading malicious payloads by sending text messages that appear to come from legitimate sources and contain malicious URLs for them to click on. Now, it could be something disguised as a coupon code, like 20% off your next Amazon purchase, or it could be an offer to win free tickets to some upcoming event or show. So, how does it work? One way that it works is an attacker distributes this malicious mobile content to a victim. He sends you like an SMS message like, check out this great deal, and there's a link in it. It's a shortened link, so it fits within a text message. It doesn't say, https hackerscam.weirdwebsite.com, steal your information. You can't recognize that from the link within a text message because the area is so small. It's a shortened link, and it's just playing on the fact that they know that you don't have a lot of time. You're just glancing and you either click or you don't click, right? So he sends you this malicious content to your victim. The victim fails to recognize the attack and opens the attachment or clicks on the link to go to some mobile website. What happens next? Well, malware is installed. They ask, there's a warning that comes up, please, accept this warning or do this, that, and the other thing. And then malware is installed on the device and used to gain sensitive data from the device itself. And if you're in your corporate network, it tries to move laterally through your corporate network to infect other machines and get data from other machines. And then ultimately the data is transferred back to the attacker. One way to avoid falling victim to smishing attacks is to refer to the US short code directory. And yeah, such a thing does exist. You want to see whether the message is being sent from a legitimate source. Now, the best way to avoid it, however, is to not engage with any unsolicited text messages. If you didn't sign up for text notifications, don't click on the URL when you receive that kind of text. Now, when in doubt about the authenticity of a message, simply rely on the lesson your parents or teachers taught you, and that's don't talk to strangers. Clone phishing. The idea behind a clone phishing attack is to take advantage of legitimate messages that the victim may have already received and create a malicious version of it. So the attacker creates a virtual replica of a legitimate message, hence the attack's clever name, and sends the message from an email address that looks legitimate. Any links or attachments in the original email are swapped out for malicious ones. So how does that work? Now, an attacker, in this case, has most likely hijacked a conversation. He might have access to, like, the mail system compromised. Like, maybe there was weak email account credentials, so they were able to log into either your email account or the other party's email account. Or they might have direct access to the mail system, like Microsoft Exchange Server, through some vulnerability, and then they have control over the total mail account. So the attacker distributes this malicious email copy of the content to the victim, spoofing the original sender. So let's say Carl and John were having a conversation. Carl's email address is compromised, and the attacker takes one of the copies between their conversation, from their conversation, makes a modification, and says, oh, by the way, can you take care of this invoice? And here's the link to the invoice. When you click on it, you get infected. So the victim opens this link, so he sent you this email, and you think, oh, it's from, my buddy John in accounting or whatever. You click on the link in the attachment, believing it's coming from the legitimate person, but instead it's from a malicious person. And again, malware is installed on the device and used to gain sensitive data from the device or any connected network, and then the data is transferred back to the attacker, or access is given to the attacker for backdoors or whatever's being installed, malware, Trojans, crypto miners, etc. The criminal often uses the excuse that they're resending the original message because of an issue with the previous email's link or attachment. So in terms of, it's not just that they're injecting themselves into the conversation. What they're trying to feed you information to make it plausible why they're sending this. So if you had received a document, they're like, oh, I'm resending because it was a spelling error, or it wasn't, we sent you the wrong amount to wire. Whatever the case is, they're giving you a reason why you're receiving the same message a second time with slight modifications. Evil twin. Now, it sounds like it would be up the same alley as a clone phishing attack, an evil twin is actually a very different animal. Unlike the other methods of phishing we'll review in this episode, an evil twin is a form of phishing that capitalizes on Wi-Fi. So TechTarget.com describes an evil twin as a rogue wireless access point that masquerades as a legitimate Wi-Fi access point so the attacker can gather personal or corporate information without the end user's knowledge. Now, this type of attack has also been referred to as the Starbucks scam because it often happens or takes place in coffee shops. So what happens? So either in your corporate network or in Starbucks or some location, you want to connect to a Wi-Fi so that you can get internet access, check your emails, or, send a message to your mom, whatever it is, right? There's also an attacker there. Now, the attacker creates a second Wi-Fi, giving it the same name or same SSID as the original Starbucks, so that you can connect to the fake malicious Starbucks one, and then he can sniff out the package. So when end users connect, the attacker can then eavesdrop on their network traffic and steal their account names, passwords, and view any attachments that the user accesses while connected to the compromised hotspot. So again, they use the same SSID, the same service identifier that's as the real network. So let's say you have a choice between connecting to the real Starbucks that has like 2 bars, or this fake Starbucks that's showing 5 bars. You're gonna be like, oh, let me connect to this one, and that one happens to be the infected one. And then because it's infected and it's fake, and they have packet sniffers on there, they can actually start eavesdropping on your conversations. Now, the best way to avoid this is if you use a VPN, because that creates a secure encrypted tunnel, regardless of what router you're connected or Wi-Fi you're connected to. Creates an encrypted tunnel from your machine to wherever your endpoint is. So I highly recommend that when you're in a public Wi-Fi, you access the network via or using a VPN. Domain spoofing. The next type of phishing we want to mention is known as domain spoofing. Now, this method of attack uses either email or fraudulent websites. Now, domain spoofing occurs when a cybercriminal spoofs an organization or a company's domain to make their emails look like they're coming from the official domain, or make a fake website look like the real website by adopting the real site's design and using either a similar URL or Unicode characters that look like ASCII characters. So how's that possible? So an attacker registers a spoof domain, for example, let's say google.com, as opposed to google.com. So when they set up a mail server for google.com, all the emails would be coming from, Sergey Brin at google.com instead of google.com. Now, in the case of an email-based attack, this is about email, this is not about a spoofed domain, this is about a spoofed email, still using the google.com registered domain, a cybercriminal forges a new email header that makes it appear like the email is originating from a company's legitimate email address. So you can make the from that shows up in the email google.com, even though the real email address underneath is google.com. So in our example, the attacker starts sending emails to google.com employees. Okay, so google.com employees are receiving an email from Sergey Brin at google.com, and they're trying to get someone to kind of fall for the ruse. So if you fall for the ruse, and let's say you click on an email or you transfer money or something like that, then you're out. But if you click on a link, let's say in the case of them trying to install malware on your system, it gets installed. They gain access to sensitive data from the device or the connected network. They move laterally through your network, and of course, as is always the case, data is transferred back to the attacker. So, in the case of a web attack via phishing email, the user will be directed, like let's say it was Sergey Brin at google.com, and they say click on this link to access whatever service, the new Google service, the new Google Drive, or the new Google Gmail, or we're doing an internal beta testing at google.com for the new Gmail service, blah, blah, blah. You click on that link and you come to a website that looks exactly like that service. It's either Gmail or it's Google Drive or it's Google Analytics or whatever the service is. And again, in our example of google.com and targeting google.com employees, that would be a scenario. So When you click on it, you go to google.com, and now attackers are using HTTPS, they're using SSL certificates, a legitimate one, so everything looks legit. The site looks the same, except, that little misspelling in the domain of the EL instead of LE. And when you try to log in, of course, your credentials are then passed through to the attacker. CEO fraud and business email compromise. Now, if you recall the beginning of this episode, I said $1.8 billion alone was attributed to this kind of phishing. So this is very important. Pay attention. In a nutshell, CEO fraud occurs when a cybercriminal sends an email to a lower-level employee, typically someone who works in accounting or finance department. Now, while they're pretending to be the company's CEO or another executive like the CTO or some manager out there. Now, the goal of these emails is often to get their victim to transfer funds to a fake account. Like, here's a quick invoice from company XYZ. They need to transfer to they're changing banks, and they need to transfer to this new bank, whatever. CEO fraud is often referred to as business email compromise, which the FBI says costs businesses billions of dollars. I gave you that number, $1.8 billion. I made it huge on the screen, because that's how important this particular fraud is for most companies out there. So the attacker sends an email to a lower-level employee. The goal of these, again, is usually to trick the employee into transfer money to a fake account, like, here's a quick invoice from blah, 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 please, transfer it. It's fine. If you have any questions, hit me up, reply to this email, they might say, because the email is fake, it's coming from a different email account, it's not actually coming from the CEO, etc. Now again, 2020, $1.8 billion was stolen from companies using this method. This simple trick of sending an email from google.com to accounting saying, hey, Sergey, how you doing? Look, I have a quick request. I know it's out of the ordinary, but, I got this invoice for this particular thing or that or the other thing. I need you to send $16 or $21 million to this new account here for this company, blah, blah, blah. And accounting says, okay, well, it's coming from Sergey, got to do it. They do it, and then you're out that money. To the tune of $1.8 billion in 2020. Spear phishing is the next one. A spear phishing attack is a targeted form of phishing. Now, unlike general phishing emails where they just spray out millions of emails just trying to get whoever they can, spear phishing emails target specific individuals within an organization. So you got to do a little bit of research. You have to say, well, who's the CTO, who's the CEO, who's in terms of finance, who's like on the IT team. So they use social engineering tactics to help tailor and personalize the emails to their intended victims. They may use email subject lines that would be topics of interest to the email recipients to trick them into opening the messaging, clicking on links or attachments. So first, the attacker does his due diligence by visiting a company's social media sites and sites like, LinkedIn to find out who might be in IT. So like I look up John Doe, and I see what company he works for, and then I go to that company's LinkedIn page, and I see all the other employees, and then I can kind of piece together, this is the IT department, this is John Doe, this is Alex, and this is Jane. Then I can say, here's finance, or there's a couple other people, this person's in billing, this person's in sales, this person's in business development, here's the CEO, oh wow, okay, I have everything, I have the whole map of the company, I know who works where, who does what. Now, he might pretend, and I might pretend to then be the CEO, or I might pretend to be any one of the other managers who I dubbed to be the person who would actually pass down a command or a request to an employee. If I'm going to the IT department, then I might say I'm the CTO. All right, I might send my phishing email, my spear phishing emails being from the CTO. So I do my research as the attacker. I create my plan. That's why it's spear phishing. It's not catching people with a net. It's catching a fish with a spear. Right? One fish. Now the victim gets my message of whatever it is, like, I need you to reset the credentials of this server, if I'm going to IT, to, blah, blah, blah. And they follow the command, they do it, okay, yeah, and maybe they create a JIRA ticket and put it, okay, update password to 123456 for John. And then they reply to the email, okay, it's done. Now that email again is going, in their case of google.com, is going to cto@google.com. And then I know I have access to that machine, log in, boom, bing, bing. Malicious malware gets installed, data gets transferred to the attacker. Now, why is spear phishing so important? Spear phishing is important because 91% of cyber attacks start with a spear phishing email. The goal is often to steal data or to install malware onto the recipient's computer to gain access to the network and accounts. Unfortunately, traditional security methods may not stop these types of attacks because they're so highly customized that many traditional spam filters might miss them. Whaling. Now, whaling is a form of spear phishing. It's a lot like the inverse version of CEO fraud, where CEO fraud was that you pretend to be the CEO and you send an email to a lower level employee. Instead of targeting the low level individuals within his organization, the cybercriminal instead goes up the chain. They're trying to target high level executives such as CEOs, CFOs, and COOs. The goal is to trick the executive into revealing sensitive information and corporate data. These targets are carefully selected because of their access and authority within an organization. These attacks often use email and website spoofing. So, the attacker distributes malicious email content to the victim. In this case, it's going to the CEO. Like, hey, this is Jane in accounting. I had a question. First, can I have a vacation on blah, blah, blah? But, also there's another very important point. I need you to do this, that's, and the other thing. Can you give me, again, the routing number? Or can you give me this information about this bank account one more time? I can't seem to find it in my records. The CEO is like, oh, okay, it's Jane. Yeah, Jane, sure, you can have a vacation. I know how tough it is. You got 2 kids or whatever. Oh, by the way, here's the information. So, the social engineering tactics are designed to not just be like, hey, give me the information. It's not that simple. There's a whole sort of conversation around it. There's a whole feel around it to try to get you in the mood where your guard is down. CEOs are generally smart, we hope. They're running their companies. So it's not as easy as giving them a command or an order as in terms of a CEO fraud would be, or BEC compromise. It's going in the opposite direction. It's going up the chain of command. So you have to have a different way of fooling them. Anyway, the CEO does it. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bum. Either malware is installed or corporate information is given out, and it ultimately ends up in the hands of the attacker. Now, these targeted messages, again, rely on social engineering tactics, using information they get from the internet and various social media platforms. Again, think LinkedIn. You do all your research about the company in LinkedIn. You go to, I don't want to say the yellow pages, but you go to whatever business websites that can give information about revenues, about history, about products, new products that they launch. So you have this, you're really doing like a research paper on this company to find out as much as possible so that you can create and craft the most compelling scenario to make the CEO or the CEO or the CFO actually do what you want to do, because you're talking about hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, right? So they know the victim's name, they know his job title, they know basic details that make the communications look legitimate. HTTPS phishing. This is relatively new. In the past, it was difficult for attackers to easily get a SSL certificate, but now with things like Let's Encrypt, it's much easier. You can just generate them at will. 58% of all phishing websites, because of this ease of access, are now served via HTTPS. The approach cybercriminals use in these attacks is to send an email with only a legitimate-looking link in the email body. Now, there's often no other content except for the link itself, which may be clickable, or you might actually have to copy and paste it into your browser. So why would anybody intentionally click on such an email? Well, the short answer is because the attacker uses a variety of social engineering tactics to trick the email recipient into clicking on the link or copy and pasting the URL into their web browser. Now, you can think of any of the other types of attacks where you say, okay, maybe it's a meme. Maybe in the office culture, people send jokes around or whatever, or maybe it's a request again from the CEO. But the tactic here is to use a somewhat legitimate-looking website. So it's not just under HTTP, and then you get that weird, this website is not secure. Are you sure you want to visit it? This one has the security, so you're like, it's sitting there with a badge of security, and people are saying, oh, well, this must be a legitimate website, even though it's google.com and not google.com. So the attacker distributes this malicious email with just a link or, a subject line that says, really funny, check it out, and of course the victim woefully clicks on it, gets a little warning like, oh, you should, let me send you messages, or here's a warning from the website, please accept this, and then they download and install the malware. Malware is installed on the device and used to gain sensitive data. This is a recurring theme. It's been in every slide. They move laterally through the network, and at the end, hey, guess what? Data is transferred back to the attacker. Vishing. You already heard about smishing and understand that it's phishing for SMS messaging. So, if you guessed that vishing is voice phishing, phishing over the phone, then you are correct. A vishing attack occurs when a criminal calls your phone to try to get you to provide personal or financial information. Now, they often use automated calls to reroute individuals who fall for the tactics and end up speaking with the criminals themselves. They also use mobile apps and other techniques to spoof their phone number or to hide their phone numbers entirely. So, again, attacker uses call robots and other tricks to mass call potential victims. Now, the victim answers the phone and divulges personally identified information that can be used for more attacks. Or, in some cases, the person on the other end of the phone will be like, hey, you know what, let me walk you through it. Install PC Anywhere or some other remote control software like remote desktop. Give me access, and then I'll walk you through it on your computer. Let's say it's a complicated form of how to get new health insurance or whatever their scam is. They'll try to get access to your computer, and then while they have access to your computer, you're actually giving them access to your computer through remote software. I just need to download this quick piece of software which is going to help me do some calculations or whatever it is, and boom. Personally identified information is obtained either through an info stealer that they just installed, or you've given it to them, or they install malware, and of course, then they have the information on their computer. Watering hole phishing. This lesser-known type of phishing attack is reminiscent of a scene from the animal kingdom. Now, picture a group of zebras, an antelope, and other creatures on the Serengeti at a watering hole. To cool themselves, they edge nearer to the water and lean in to take a drink. Now, one zebra is all proud. He decides to get a little cooler and wanders a little too far from the herd into the water. Suddenly, a crocodile bursts up from beneath the surface of the water and grabs him, dragging them under. Not that dramatic, but the effect can be just as devastating. Okay, in terms of the Serengeti, you're losing your life, but here, you might be losing your lifeblood in terms of fraud, $1.8 billion. Your entire corporation gets attacked with ransomware, and you're essentially out of business until you can get back online. So, watering hole attacks, or watering hole phishing attacks, target businesses by identifying specific websites that your company or employees visit most often. So, if I'm trying to attack company XYZ, I need to kind of think, what companies or what websites are they going to visit? Or is it Yahoo Finance, or is it Code Project, Stack Overflow? Like, where are they going, right? Now, then they infect one of the sites that you go to with malware. Like, let's say they know that you use a specific piece of software, so they go to Code Project, and they put up an article specifically about this software and specifically about a case problem. And in there is some kind of comment with a link, and that link leads to some malicious website or something like that. It's a little complicated, but that's essentially the gist of it. Now, the sites that are selected for infection might be a vendor whose services your company uses. Let's say, Fortinet or Cisco or some other company that you have this piece of software or piece of hardware that you use and they know about. The goal is to infect the websites so that when you or your employees visit that website, your computers will automatically be loaded with malware. Now, this will provide the attackers with access to your network servers and sensitive information such as personal and financial data. So, again, an attacker, in this case, infects a website that has nothing to do with you, or it's not directly connected to you, but it's a website that you use or your company employees use, because they know your employees will certainly visit them at some point. It might be daily, or it might be like once a month or once a quarter. Well, the victim eventually visits the malware-infected website. Malware is installed on the device and used to gain sensitive data from the device on any connected network, and of course data is transferred back to the attacker. Now, you might be asking yourself, will other people who visit the infected site also fall victim to the attack? Yeah, sure, but they're just collateral damage and extra victims for cybercriminals. There are other types of phishing attacks, like snowshoeing, but we cover the most prevalent attacks in the current environment here in this episode, as well as those expected to dominate in 2022. Now, how can you avoid falling for many types of phishing attacks? So, truly effective cybersecurity is a multi-layered approach. Now, here are some things you can do to help prevent your business from becoming the next phishing-related headline. Train your employees to adopt email best practices. Now, this should go without saying, but it bears repeating since this still seems to be a sticking point for some businesses. Train your employees, all of them. This includes everyone from janitors all the way up to the CEO. You want to implement policies for dealing with specific types of mail, like emails with attachments, to ensure people do not just click to open and accept, enable macros on any attachment without following specific procedures. Now, these procedures could be uploading files to testing websites to have the files tested for malware, or passing unrecognized emails to IT for them to perform the tests on the email. You want to implement the use of email signing certificates. Digital security certificates are known as SMIME certificates because they use security multi-purpose internet mail extensions or MIMEs to encrypt the content of our emails and any attachments, and to digitally sign our communications. So you have this process of education, which is first and foremost. If your employees don't know what to do or how to do it, of course they're going to make a mistake. You need to have these processes and policies in place in your security plan to ensure that your first line of defense, the people who are actually getting these phishing attacks, have a process and have something in place. It could be a little crib sheet, just a list of things to do that's taped on their screen or whatever. Get an email with attachment, this is what you do. Whatever your process is, you need to make your employees or help your employees become sensitive to the threat, so that they don't end up, because it's it's embarrassing for them. They might lose their job. You're trying to help them. You're not just trying to force them to do something. You're trying to help them ensure that the company they work for and love remains to be a resilient citizen of the internet without being attacked and being used for other malicious activity. With that, I say thanks again for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.